Coming up on episode 83 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Sacramento Kings. You know what? Last week we talked about them tanking. This week they basically made the play-in. So we got to talk about that. They're on a recent winning streak. They're looking pretty good. We got to talk about Zach Lavine and them boys. So we talk about the Kings, but then we pivot on to the 2025 NFL draft. It's a couple weeks away. Ben and I offer our top tier prospects that we're really paying attention to going into the draft with a few weeks left. So we take a look at some prospects and offer up who we really are looking out for going into this. And then we pivot on to talk some March Madness and, Duke possibly choking, Houston, choking, like crazy finish to March Madness. So we definitely dive into our takes there. And with that being said, guys, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Retz. Ben, how are you, my brother? How we doing?
I'm good, man. We just celebrating the girlie's birthday over here. Shout out Daniela. It's
Happy
her birthday this
Daniela.
weekend. So we were just hanging out this weekend. Took Monday off and got some things done. So it was a nice weekend. How about you?
Very nice. Yeah, it was a nice chill weekend. We didn't do anything too crazy. Took the dog to the park. So just hung out and very relaxing, just chilling out at home. We've been really busy lately too. So it's been nice to just kind of get a weekend to not do anything.
For sure.
So, we got to watch some ton of sports. Obviously we have some final thoughts to talk about for March Madness. It was an epic game. But we have, as we mentioned in the intro, a lot to talk about. So, last week, we're going to start with Sacramento. Last week we entertained the idea of the Kings tanking, and early on I thought they had heeded our prayers. They had heard us. They went to Washington and took a really embarrassing loss, and I was like, this is great, like we're set up, like the momentum's heading the wrong way. But then for all you optimists out there, you Alex Lieberts out there of the world, I do think that they got their wish, and the Kings went on a 3-game win streak that ended, it was Monday against the Detroit Pistons. But so we beat the Charlotte Hornets, and then we followed the last back-to-back of the season on the road. We beat the Cavs, and then we beat the Pistons in pretty impressive fashion. With the Pistons, we were down as much as 18 points, and we were able to come back. Zach Lavine exploded. DeMar DeRozan played well. The Domas Sabonis, our big three, I think, was really the story of these past 3 games. Like they really did well shouldering the load. What was your takeaways from this 3-game win streak specifically? Because that losing streak behind the Kings have basically clinched the play-in spot. So now we got to talk about these. We got to hop back on board. We got to ride with our boys. So what about this 3-game win streak did you like? Did you really notice that stood out to you?
I mean, for me, the big 3 was awesome, but the 3-game span for Zach Lavine was really impressive to me. This tweet I'm about to read is from Will Z Stats. He says, over the last 3 games, Zach Lavine is 19 of 29, good for 65% from beyond the arc. Asking for a friend, is that good? It's no coincidence that the Kings are 3-0 in that stretch. Lavine with one of the most smooth shots in the game. And this that tweet really highlighted it for me because, dude, this 3-game span for Lavine was really impressive. And it went to show exactly why we need Lavine to shoot 25 shots a game if we want to have any chance in winning. Because he's a bucket. He's an absolute bucket.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Lavine that's the most impressive, and we've talked about that, we've alluded to it a couple times, when Lavine gets hot, I've never really seen, we haven't in the, as for the Kings fans, I don't remember a player in recent memory, even Fox in general, that was able to take and make the shots that Lavine has made. The level of difficulty he's making, he's shooting over double teams, he's just stepping back and shooting over his man. It doesn't matter. and it's going in. And like we saw against the Pistons and the Cavaliers, it felt like he went at Donovan Mitchell and Cade Cunningham just going back and forth. The Pistons game, he scored 16 unanswered points by himself. He went on a
Yep.
16-0 run. And that's fun. It's fun to watch when he gets cooking. And the funny part was, he had such an awesome game against Detroit, and DeMar also had 37 points, and that was kind of lost by the wayside because you didn't really think about it. But when those two get going together, we are a very hard team to stop because they're picking up buckets at every spot. And obviously we lose games because they can't always stay this hot. And those are the things that we need to, address. But when we play like this, we can compete with anybody. So I do think that's, the offensive firepower that we have is important. And I agree. Lavine, we've seen too many times already in his tenure here where he has kind of taken that back seat. And I really just I don't care, dude. Huck up 30 shots a game. That is what we traded you for. That's what you're here for. I do not care. DeMar's going to chuck up 20 shots anyway. Zach Lavine might as well take the other 20 at this point. Like I'm okay if that's how we want to approach it moving forward.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at, because the thing is, when he's not shooting 25, we're not winning the game. When he's playing off ball and just kind of hiding away in the corner for, a 5-minute, 6-minute span, our offense goes completely stagnant, and every single possession is just DeMar ISO, spin to the left, fade away jumper. And it's like, it gets like, I don't want to take advantage of, or take for granted rather, what we have in DeMar DeRozan, because we have a future Hall of Famer. We have a legend in DeMar DeRozan. Like, he's somebody who is extremely fun to watch. And he's somebody that, we talked about. One of the problems for the Kings going into this year was when they have these offensive woes, we need somebody who can just get us a bucket. Well, he's done that all season long without fail. Like, he has been that guy. So that's all good, but you can't have somebody who gets paid as much money as Zach Lavine does stand in the corner for as long as he has done, when we see, guys like Malik Monk essentially run point guard and DeMar DeRozan being on the court at the same time. Like, there's a lineup in there where it features Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Zach Lavine, Domantas Sabonis, and pick the last one, probably Keegan. There's a lineup there that there's almost too much firepower. And that, I think, finding the balance has been a tough part for Doug Christie and this Kings team, having as many shooters as they do. Because it's like, who are you going to ask to come off the bench? And you and I have had this conversation like many times where I'm like, bench this guy. And you're like, why the hell would you bench this guy? That's not a good idea. We're not benching him. If you're going to bench anybody, you bench this guy. So it's like, it's a tough situation you got to deal with. But when you have a instance as of late where Malik Monk has got this left calf strain going on, he comes back and then he encounters tightness 6 minutes into the game against Detroit and goes out. Well, that's one less shooter, one less ball handler out there, and so the wealth is spread then amongst less players. And I hate to be that guy, but it does seem like at times the less firepower that this team has on the court at one time, the better they are. And I don't know if it's a matter of just, figuring out some rotations or going to your bench earlier into the game. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I am definitely noticing there's just too much firepower at times that you're having $45 million guys just standing in the corner.
Right, and we talked about this too. The whole Zach Lavine, DeMar DeRozan experience. Zach Lavine is a veteran in his own right, but DeMar DeRozan is the veteran, and he is the one. You see Lavine defer to DeMar as he's like, "Here you go, Unc. Like you're my, you are the guy. Like I will give it to you anyway." And you're right. When they're both on there, you do tend to see one of them's going to go stand in the corner and the other one's going to do their thing. And even when like Lavine's hot and he's the one with the hot hand and he's like hovering around DeMar, like, hey, you can pass me the ball. DeMar's like, I can move. Like someone comes at a screen. Like I've noticed that a few times. And I do think that does, stall our offense a bit. Like it does. I think it, like you said, with less firepower, you have kind of one or two clear for sure. The offense is going to run through this guy, style of play. So it does kind of say like, oh, maybe we don't have to worry about Lavine being in the corner because it's going to be Keon and we want him to shoot from the corner because no one's going to be on him or things like that. So I wanted to address the, you know, my take last week was, our take, for the most part, we were, rightfully so. I think we were bashing on this team. We're really hoping that, for the future of this team, we were really worried about, what we're going to be able to do moving forward without that pick. But now we're in this spot where we're in the play-in. So most likely, like the Suns will most likely not be able to catch us. There's 3 games left in the season. The Suns would have to win all of them. We'd have to lose all of them. And I don't think that's going to happen, especially since we played the Suns at our last game too. So we're basically matched up with the Mavs, and we are 1 game ahead of the Mavs, but we own the tiebreaker. So it's basically a 2-game stretch. So as long as we win one of these final 3 games, we're going to be set up for the 9th seed in the play-in, which means a home play-in game to start the play-in tournament. And there's a couple of things up top that we can talk about for how the Kings' chances might actually have just improved given the state of the standings around them. And I wanted to offer this up to you, and I know we've kind of talked. I'm pretty sure I brought this up to you off pod, but I just, I've talked to a few people about it today. But there's one team in particular I'm really keeping an eye on. They're winning now, but there's still a chance that they can slide, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies. And if the Grizzlies, who are going through their own chaotic stages with letting go of their coach Taylor Jenkins last week or a couple weeks ago now, and they haven't been playing well as of late. And this year, they have been a team that we have had their number against. So if the cards kind of fall right, the Kings could end up facing the Mavericks, hopefully beating the Mavericks, because we've also had their number this year. And then somehow the Grizzlies lose in round 1, and then they fall to us, and it's a matchup against Memphis. And all of a sudden, it's not a matchup against Minnesota or the Clippers or the Warriors. How confident would you be when this idea? Because I'm thinking, like, if we get that matchup, there's an actual chance we would make the playoffs. I don't know about you if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, a lot of playoff success, and I'm going to call it playoff success while we talk about this, is rooted on momentum, right? And teams that have momentum going into the playoffs typically tend to, keep that momentum going. Teams that have been ice cold or ran into, some rubble and ran into some issues, they're not just gonna, put that behind them and, start fresh in the playoffs. It's not really something that happens, especially to a team that no longer has hardly any of their coaching staff that they started the season and got 46 wins with. So, looking at the Grizzlies, like their last 10 games, they're 3-7. Yeah, they're on a win streak right now and having just handily beat the Hornets, but like I'm not convinced that team is, the same 46-32 team that, they have been all season long. I think that if the Kings get a shot at the Grizzlies, they're going to smell that blood in the water, especially with some of those lethal shooters in Zach Lavine and DeMar DeRozan and just being in the play-in, those 2 guys before. I think this is going to be a little bit more passion from those 2 guys particularly, because we've talked about this a couple times. Zach Lavine and DeMar DeRozan have both lost at least one, I think it was 2, play-in series. So they hate the play-in, and DeMar talked about it earlier in the season. He's like, I hate the play-in. I think it's a stupid idea. I think that, obviously I have some skewed ideas about it because I've lost them, but, I think going into it, they're going to have this so much like aggression and anger towards the fact that they have to be in this play-in that I think it might pay off. So seeing the Grizzlies wouldn't be a bad thing.
Right. And again, when we compare to some of the other teams that are above us, we're going to be facing the Clippers shortly here, and we'll discuss that a little bit. But there are just teams that are tougher matchups with better playoff experience. And the Grizzlies have been one of those teams, very much like the Kings, who had that insane rise, and they kind of, injuries ruined everything for them last year, and the whole Jaws situation. And Jaws still kind of up to his own, to his antics this season, and is also hurt. And they've somehow managed to play better, stay consistent. But then they fired their coach, and there's just all this stuff. So it's like Memphis is kind of, like you said, a team that if they get into the ring with us, we actually have a puncher's chance of, sneaking away, especially with the momentum that we're on. But I am curious. Our next 3 games, we got the Denver Nuggets, and we got a lot to talk about with that Denver Nuggets team, the Clippers, and the Suns. W- What momentum do you think would be enough to catapult a play-in run? Do you think we need to win all three in order to keep this streak going and they're going to be fine, or do you think they could essentially just lose the next two, beat Phoenix, and go into the play-in on the right foot? And do you think that would be enough? You get what I'm saying? If do you think what momentum would we need to boost a play-in run in your opinion?
So this team is very much a team of runs, as we've seen this year, and that's on the winning end and the losing end. So a large part of me wants to think that losing against the Nuggets would be okay. Even dropping the game against the Clippers might be okay, but you have to end your regular season with a win at your house against Phoenix, regardless of whether Phoenix has the shot or not, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get that win there, that last regular season game. It's the last one in front of your fans before the play-in starts. Obviously, you're trying to lock in that home court advantage for the play-in. If you have that home court advantage, you're just running it back in your house. You get all that time at home. Um, and at that point, let's say you beat Phoenix. Actually, let's back up. Let's say you beat the Clippers in your house. Then you run it and you beat, the Suns. So now you're on a 2-game win streak. You stay in your house and you get another dub. That's massive. That's a 3-game before you hit the road. So I'm really looking at the last game of the season against the Suns and saying you have to get that one. I think if you drop this Nuggets game, I kind of get it. They're fresh off of something very interesting that we're about to talk about. And that Clippers game is going to be tough regardless because they've been a tough matchup all season long for the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you found a way to beat the Clippers in any way, shape, or form, that's massive towards momentum because you kind of feel like you've kind of overcome a wall of some sort, maybe by beating them. But I really want that Phoenix game.
Yeah, and the Clippers are very much a team fighting for their own playoff lives, trying to get out of that seventh seed, or that eighth seed. So this is gonna be tough. But the Denver game we wanted to address, just not so much for the game itself, but just for those who haven't paid attention. Today's April 8th. A lot of news came out today um, regarding the Denver Nuggets. They fired head coach Michael Malone, GM Calvin Booth, in an effort to find momentum for the playoffs. And this comes out of, this apparently, based off reports, has been building for years. There was even a report that said had the Nuggets not won in 2023, that title, that Michael Malone would have been out that year. Him and Calvin Booth weren't even speaking to each other. They were talking ill of each other behind each other's backs to other people. Like, there was arguments over Russell Westbrook's playing time. Like, things were so messy, and the winning kind of concealed everything behind the scenes. Like, oh, we're winning. We have Joker. We have Murray. Like, everything's good. Um, what was your? You were the one who texted me. You were my Shams this morning. But what what was your initial reaction to the Mike Malone firing?
I was shocked, bro. It took a minute for that to really sink in, and it's like I want to say up front, I'm not in any way, shape, or form happy that he got fired by any stretch of the imagination. But what I am going to say is it does make me feel better about the Kings firing Mike Malone, knowing that, this wasn't the worst firing of Mike Malone's career. I think that this Nuggets job, he has done so much for that team, for that organization. He had been there for a number of years. He was a stable point for them. And obviously winning a chip with the Nuggets, yeah, you can put a lot of that on the roster and specifically on the Joker. But I don't know, man. I'm looking around the room now at the coaches who have just walked away from their seats and the coaches who remain, and I'm seeing 3 seats for coaches who held their teams the most accountable throughout the majority of the season, in the good times and the bad times. And I saw 3 coaches in Taylor Jenkins, Mike Brown, and Mike Malone who went to the podium after tough games and held every single one of their players accountable and said, you know, this guy didn't do his job. My guys didn't do their jobs. he's not watching the tape. They're not watching the tape. It's going to fall back on me, even though, I look around the room and I go, does this make sense, everybody? Is everyone good here? Is this all good? Like, these are three coaches who I want to say had the respect of their teams, of their rosters, but now because they've, for whatever reason, run into some controversy and run into some, tough times, they've been let go because the team isn't too standard. And it's just kind of wild to me, man, because like I said, I'm looking at the room, three coaches who hold their teams to a high level and ask the most of their guys, hold them accountable every single night, and they no longer have jobs. I'm wondering the direction that some of these organizations are going now, and what the future for the league looks like.
Yeah, I mentioned it definitely, you're seeing the term player driven league really kind of take over now. Like, I do think that whenever a coach gets fired, the first assumption is, oh, he must have had an issue with his players, or there must have been something that we didn't know. And obviously, there's always way more to the picture than what's initially announced. And I'm sure that more stuff's going to be coming out over the next few weeks about the Malone situation, just very much like how the Mike Brown situation happened with De'Aaron Fox. Like, you get that information after they're gone. You never know until they're gone what actually goes down. And I do think it's, for the Nuggets, it's an interesting situation because for them, they put all their chips in the basket, got the chip, and you have this 2-3-time MVP. Like, you have all the right pieces to be a contender every year, and people like the team. They like Joker. He's a likable player in terms of his skill set and his attitude and everything. And people like Jamal Murray because he's a bucket in big moments and it's entertaining. And the Nuggets have been a staple in the West for the past few years, but now they still have the roster, they still have the talent. I do think that there is a slight talent deficiency that they're missing in order to be a championship team. I do think they kind of fell back to that kind of tier below the top tier. But this was crazy. And to hear all the dysfunction, at the end of the day, I do think that the organization, felt like it was the best move for them. But is that really the best move? I do think they got worse. There's not going to be a replacement for Michael Malone. There are very few coaches that you could replace Michael Malone with and say, oh, we got better coaching wise. So I do think that, crappy loss for Denver, crappy situation for Mike Malone. He always gets the short end of the stick when it comes to getting let go. But, obviously, as an opposing fan, we're definitely like, okay, like, they got worse. Okay, we'll see how it works out for them. But, no love lost here. But I thought, Mike Malone has a history with the Kings. We're going to be facing them. We're about to get the first game of post Mike Malone Denver. So it's going to be very interesting to see how hard they come out and play against us at home after we just got back from a very arduous 6-game road trip. So I thought that was important to mention because that was big news all over the NBA today.
It is, yeah. And it's rather interesting that he gets fired the game before playing the Sacramento Kings. I don't know, it's storybook in a lot of ways. But yeah, man, this 3-game stand is going to be really interesting. And obviously all 3 games in our house, we finish at home. I'm excited. I know last week we talked about this team on a very low level, but it deserved that. This team deserved to have a conversation go that way because the feeling around Sacramento was very low about this team. Obviously, beating the Hornets, that's a team you felt you should have always beaten. Losing to the Wizards, that was kind of ridiculous. And that was frustrating in a lot of ways, but you get that rebound against the Hornets in a very convincing fashion. You sweep the Cavaliers, who tonight clinched the East. So that right there is a pretty good statement. And then you go into Detroit to a team that just clinched the playoffs for the first time since 2019. And make a statement, make another statement there and get a really nice win. So this team is finding some momentum at the right time. And if they can continue to find any momentum, even off of some losses, just find rhythm, find, things that are working, find sets that are working, rotations that work. If you can find anything right now at the end of the season that you can use going into the play-in, you're going to position yourselves really well.
Yeah, these last 3 games are really just going to be tune up and really just get right. Find a rhythm, like you said. Hopefully some of these guys come back. Hopefully Malik Monk is healthy by the play-in. Hopefully Keegan Murray is fully healthy by the play-in. He's questionable for tomorrow, so we'll see if he does play or if they sit him out or what they decide to do there. But, and Laravia has a fractured finger, so we don't know if he's going to be suiting up anytime.
Right.
I don't know if the idea is maybe we, survive the play-in without him and then he gets a wrap for the playoffs and maybe he's back by round one. So that sucks. It's a tough loss, but we've been making it up, and that's the whole point. We have, enough depth from that position to survive. But the goal is this team has beaten good teams while, limited. So they do show the potential of being able to rally together. So hopefully these last 3 games can provide enough momentum. We clinched our, home game in the play-in tournament and make Sacramento a loud place again. We, can win a home play-in game again and set ourselves up to be better than last year in terms of where we ended the season, even if our regular season record is potentially going to be below 500. So, not the, then
You find a way.
you and I are going to readdress was this a successful season here in a couple weeks like we always do, because we feel, it always changes how it ends up. So we'll see. But any final thoughts on the Kings before we switch on over to some football?
Yeah, just one final one, just to kind of build off of the injuries. The Kings did sign Terrence Davis today to a contract through the end of the season.
TD.
And so TD's back. He's back in SAC, and his last time in SAC was 2023 when he was here. Prior to that, 3 years. So I've always liked TD. You and I kind of had a conversation about that. I think TD's a solid grab for us, especially if we're looking for a little bit of depth with some injuries right now. But he's not the defensive-minded player that we've been asking for, and he's not necessarily the most consistent player either, but he is somebody who the organization speaks rather high of and has continued to even after his departure here. So welcome back, TD, just in time. Let's see some 50 bombs.
Yeah, exactly. TD, a very streaky scorer, had some big breakout games here in SAC during his tenure here. Just two of note for those, he's been in the G League. There was articles that he decided not to play in Europe because he really wanted to stay in the NBA. He took less money to play for the G League. He tore his Achilles in 23 at the end of the year and ended up coming back, signing with Milwaukee G League team in October, and he's been playing ever since, averaging about 15 some points there. So we haven't seen him in the NBA since. So we haven't really seen what he's been like lately, but it is good to get that familiarity. It's good to have him back. So yeah, welcome back, TD. We'll see if we end up using him in this 3-game stretch. If we want to maybe keep Malik Monk out and make sure he's fully healthy, and maybe just let Devin Carter and him just get some run together, stuff like that. So, it doesn't hurt to have a depth position in this particular spot. So yeah, good to have him back.
Agreed.
All right. So we are going to talk about some football. We're going to do NFL draft, guys. We have a lot of prospects we really want to talk about. So that was it for the Sacramento Kings. Let's light the beam a few more times to end the season strong, but we will be right back to talk some football. All right, we are back to talk some NFL draft. It is just a few weeks away. It's my favorite time of year. For a number of years when the Eagles weren't winning the Super Bowl, it's always just like, all right, who can we add to get things going? And I'm sure, Ben, this is I don't know if this was a fun process for you so much as it was just like a lot of information to take in, because the Niners have a very premium spot. They are picking at 11. So, and the Eagles will be picking at 32. So Ben and I kind of picked and this is just initial. We're going to do a big old draft pod here right before the draft. So stay tuned for that. We're really excited, but we thought we would do a precursor. Some guys that, have either maybe potentially been linked to the team, guys who we really like personally, or guys that we think would be the best fits for this team. And we kind of separated them into 3 tiers. Now, we each have quite a few players, so we're definitely not going to spend too much time on everybody, but we definitely just wanted to get some names out, some names that we could potentially look out for as fans who we're really excited to see. So, Ben, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is definitely going to be day one guys who we could see them picking first. Well, our team's picking in the first round of the draft. So Ben, you got a few guys that you want to name for your tier 1 players. walk me through your process, how you kind of came up with this decision. Is this a Niners based decision, like, oh, the Niners will most likely end up with one of these players, or I really wanted to pick these players for the team? Tell me about your process.
It's more a me thing, because if it was me, I would take an offensive lineman, offensive tackle, maybe, at pick 11, depending on who's there. But knowing the Niners, they probably won't take an offensive lineman at all, or if they do, it'll probably be in the round five. But I this was a fun exercise. All off season long, I've been kind of keeping up with these kids in college and trying to really get a head start on a lot of this and seeing how it's shaken down and seeing, the visits to the 49ers facility lately and who showed up. It's kind of opened my eyes to get an idea what the Niners are going to do. So while these are my guys and guys that I would love to see on the Niners team, some of them are a mix of what I anticipate the Niners to draft. Others I don't anticipate the Niners to draft. And I'll kind of when we get into the legit mock draft in a couple weeks, I'll kind of talk about that as those picks come up. And I'll say, well, I would like to take this guy. Niners are probably going to take this guy, kind of thing. So if you're ready, I'm ready to get right into it.
Heck yeah. All right. So we will start with the Niners. They own the 11th overall pick, which is such a nice spot in this particular draft, or maybe not in terms of certain players that might be on and off the board at this time. But the Niners are in a premium spot. So, Ben, who's the first name that we maybe should look out for, or who you really enjoyed looking at during this draft process?
Kelvin Banks Jr. is my number one right now. Offensive
Oh,
tackle from Texas. Projects to be a high ceiling prospect who could excel at either tackle or guard with the versatility of being a potential impact starter at either position. His strengths include exceptional quickness out of his stance with great footwork, elite spatial awareness, elite hand techniques, exceptional mental processing when dealing with stunts and defensive schemes, and rarely caught out of position. Some weaknesses he has are just shorter than average and below average arm length, makes for poor leverage against larger framed edge defenders, which you will see a lot of in the NFL. Balance issues due to form at times and sometimes overextends when reaching for defenders. But that was my number one guy right now. And if he is available, this is a pick that I would be very high on because this offensive tackle position is obviously this is going to be a massive need for the Niners now and in the future for this team.
no, Banks is an excellent name. He's been mocked all over the place, but mainly in the top 20s. It really will be depending on team, needs at the time and who falls, all that. That's the thing about this draft too, is like we're gonna have some of these guys, and we're like, man, there might not be a chance that these guys end up, falling to us or anything like that. But there's so many things that we can't plan for. Like we can't plan for one of our teams to trade up or down. Like we don't know
Nope.
that. So we just kind of have to hope that in this exercise that if we do end up with this player, there might end up falling to us, or maybe a team, we end up trading up for these guys. So it is one of those things to pay attention to. But Kelvin Banks is an awesome name. He is definitely one of those O linemen I looked at, but he's a little bit too good for it to be. He most likely won't be there by the time the Eagles pick.
Yeah, and it is a little high for him, taking him at 11. But the thing with the Niners right now is you can kind of pick your poison, and that's what I'm gonna get into here with my second guy. And my second guy is Michael Williams, defensive end and edge.
Ooh.
Yeah, and he's a combination of power, length, and natural athleticism that screams first round talent. Williams presents flashes of dominance while also leaving you wanting more from his inconsistent production and technical rawness. He's going to be the risk that a team takes when they draft him, but his strengths include rare power at the point of attack, scheme versatility, showing equal comfort from multiple alignments. That's huge. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Advanced recognition skill in the run game and not typically caught out of position. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this scheme versatility. Robert Saleh is defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Rob Saleh likes to throw different looks at teams throughout a game. And Michael Williams, I think, would be a really good pick for Rob Saleh if he wants a little bit of that versatility in terms of where you can line him up and give teams different looks. So I'm pretty high on him. I think that he would be a really good pick. He does have some weaknesses, late jumps on snap times occasionally. He relies too heavily on power moves, needs to develop a little more diversity in his arsenal from an edge rushing perspective. But I really like him, dude.
Yeah, Michael Williams, from Georgia, definitely one of those good Georgia boys. He's one of the younger players in this draft. So, and there's a lot of edge
Yeah.
players in this draft that are relatively young. And I'm definitely going to bring up a few names too. But Michael Williams has been mocked all over the place. He's been as high as 10 I've seen to the Bears. And, he's been in the late teens in the 20s too. But he's definitely, he's a player that checks a lot of boxes for how you evaluate a defensive, an edge in the NFL. That's the thing with some of these edge dudes is you're going to see guys who have all the physical traits, but maybe in college they didn't provide the level of production. So as as an analyst, for people who actually, really like doing this stuff, they do take some of those things into considerations, but teams operate differently. So Michael Williams put him on the edge with Nick Bosa, and that you guys got a, fearsome edge pairing there too.
Well, exactly, and he's 20 years old, like you were saying. He's a young guy. Like he's got a lot to learn. He's got a high ceiling of potential. His floor is already pretty high. He's got the long arms. He's a high character guy. And on top of that, he was one of the 30 visits or the 10 visits so far that the Niners have listed as so far. So anyway,
Huge.
Really big on Michael Williams. I would love to see us take him if he's available, but he has been linked in the top 10s. So moving on, Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Georgia.
Oh, you're going big.
I am. So it's explosiveness off the edge and development as an off-ball linebacker. Jump off the screen as a great combination of twitch and power with the potential of wreaking havoc for quarterbacks in the NFL with a little bit more development. His strengths include a quick first step off the edge, rare bend and flexibility for a linebacker, his size giving him an advantage to beat blocks. Brings great scheme versatility. We just talked about that. With an experience both as an edge rusher and an off-ball linebacker and Georgia's multiple defensive looks. So, Georgia showed a lot of defensive looks throughout their season, and he was a massive reason why they were able to find a lot of that success. I really like Jalen Walker. I think that he's another guy that is you can kind of plug and play. He's got some weaknesses, but the thing with him is he's going to be learning next to the best linebacker in the league, and playing with a guy like Fred Warner, I think would just boost everything that he's capable of doing. So I would be totally okay with the Niners drafting Jalen.
Yeah, and Jalen would be a kind of player, especially now recently. He's been getting a lot of hype. They said recently that he could go as high as 4 to the New England Patriots. There's a lot of people in the Patriots room that like him. So no, if he ends up falling into your lap at 11, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad pick at all. So no, definitely, I love that name. All right, who else you got?
You're going to like this one, Marcos. Jihad Campbell, linebacker from Alabama, a dynamic defender who can wreak havoc on an offensive game plan from multiple alignments. His strengths include explosive first step, elite coverage instincts, described as a Swiss Army knife when considering his versatility from a schematic standpoint. The weaknesses that he shows the most are sometimes gets over aggressive and shows vulnerabilities against misdirection. And his pass rush plan is somewhat of one-dimensional and needs expansion with reps in the NFL. And obviously, the more reps that he gets and playing with a guy like Fred Warner is going to help you a lot with that development. So if you're seeing a little bit of a scheme with me right now, I'm wanting to take a high floor, potential high ceiling linebacker to line up with Fred Warner because I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of success from the 49ers with elite linebacker play throughout the years. And getting back to that elite level at both linebacker positions is something that I want to see this team get back to as quick as possible. And I think that if you give that option to Rob Saleh, it's going to open up everything else that he wants to do defensively from a schematic standpoint.
Now, honestly, I do think, the traits that Jihad shows he's definitely just one of a kind athlete. I do think that
He's incredible.
if you want to take a mold of linebacker that I think Robert Saleh would like to have in the room, he is definitely one of those guys. And again, if you're training with the best linebacker in the league and Fred Warner, it's just like that would be a nightmare matchup because again, he presents that athleticism and intensity that you would have gotten from a Dre Greenlaw or any secondary linebacker that you've seen. The Niners' success with these awesome defenses that they have always been the staple has always been have two elite linebackers, and it's just been one of those things that if they can get back to the roots with Saleh, Jahad Campbell would be an awesome pick. He was one of my guys, but at the same time, he's going to be drafted a little too high for our liking, unfortunately. So yeah, you get to have fun with him, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's if I had to pick a linebacker right now that we really have a good shot at, I think he's probably my number one. But it's tough because I really like Jalen Walker. I think either one would be a really good pick, and I would be totally happy with. But man, Jahad Campbell, he like you said, he is the blueprint of what Rob Saleh wants to do. So keep your eyes on him. I think there's potential there. So
Love it.
moving on. We got no lineman up in here. We got Will Campbell from LSU.
What a dog.
Technical blocker who is starter ready by game one at the tackle position. Faced many SEC head rushers in matchups against Alabama and Florida, where he showcased his talents and reliabilities. His strengths include elite recovery ability, elite grip strength and hand placement, exceptional football IQ. Look, Will Campbell to me is, in my opinion, he's the best O lineman in the draft. And I think that if the Niners want to actually, for the first time, go the route of getting an O lineman, and you want to get serious about your trenches, I think a really, really good starting point is running with Will Campbell.
And Will Campbell, he's personally one of my favorite players in the draft just because of his personality. If you haven't checked out Will Campbell, just go on YouTube, just look up some of his interviews. They're really funny. He's a very intelligent guy. He just it makes it better because he has that southern drawl, and the way he speaks is hilarious to me. I love listening to him talk. The whole talk about him during the combine was, oh, his arms are too short, so he can't play left tackle. And he commented, he's like, well, if you guys think that because my arms are a little bit short that I can't play, then you guys obviously haven't seen me play before. I think if Will Campbell slides to you guys, because again, he was mocked as high as 4 to the Patriots as well. If Will Campbell slides, you have your left tackle of the future that he also presents a level of versatility where you could play him at guard if you really wanted to and have him train next to Trent Williams to just see what it's about. And then you immediately have an upgrade on your offensive line. He could play, or you could start him at right tackle and it would still probably work the same. So Will Campbell presents a level of versatility, and yeah, he's a dog. I was a huge fan of Will Campbell.
Yeah. So those were my 5 guys. And, I had about 12 to 13 guys that I had to narrow down to because we have to, hit a certain time limit here. But, I'll throw out some real quick honorable mentions without necessarily talking about them. I got Josh Simmons on there, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Obviously, Armand Membu, if he's available, offensive tackle from Missouri. Mike Green, defensive end, and Will Johnson at cornerback. If the Niners actually want to get a cornerback in the first round, which they haven't done in the 8 years with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, that could be the guy, but probably not.
Hey, we'll see. There's a couple corners. I know I was curious to see if you were going to have any corners because I've seen a couple mock drafts that featured a couple corners, Will Johnson included.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. So that's a great first 5. So for my tier 1 players, for those who listened to our episode last week, I did list 3 prospects that I was keeping an eye on for the Eagles' top 30 visits, because for the Eagles specifically, top 30 visits matter as of their recent history with recent draft picks. They were top 30 picks, but they are also these 2 of my players who are also two of my 2 favorite players of this draft. So I will just rehash those guys real quick. My favorite edge player in this draft that I think we could end up getting if he falls to us is Donovan Ezeraku, the edge from Boston College. Brought it up last week. He extremely productive in college, had 16.5 sacks. He played in the ACC, so they have some good teams, but it's definitely not the level of competition of the SEC. But extremely productive. Everything that you want in an Eagles edge rusher that they love. They like a guy who's a little undersized, but he's physical, twitchy, can just beat you at the point of attack with an elite first step. And obviously, with some of those smaller guys, he does need to learn how to set the edge in the NFL level and be able to play on all three downs. But if you're throwing him in a rotation with Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, you're really, you get to refresh that position with another young body who could end up just being your long-term starter for the future. So I definitely love Ezuraku for that pick.
Yeah, I love that pick. He had a really good combine. He like his 40 time was nice. I think he moved up from what he was originally plotted to be. So
Yeah.
he's opened some eyes. I think that he could fall to you guys. I wouldn't be surprised if he does go a little bit earlier though. But nice,
Yeah,
I like that.
I've been seeing mocks having him go now as high as I think whatever the Packers pick is, so 23rd. I've also seen he's a very popular Lions mock draft too to pair alongside Aiden Hutchinson. So he's definitely going to get some noise in the 20s. And that's the hard part with the Eagles being in 32. There's these guys are like they either have to fall to us or we have to trade up, and that's going to be one of those things where every guy that I mentioned here that sounds like we have to go up, I would trade up for. So that's kind of why I put them on this list. The other guy from last week that I want to touch up on is guard Donovan Jackson, the guard from Ohio State. He's somebody that probably would most likely be available at 32. So he's probably that fringe, in the 30s guy. But for the Eagles, in terms of their missing guard spot, he could be the plug and play, and he fits the mold. He's athletic, he's nimble on his feet, and he's a mauler. He's powerful. He played for an excellent running offense in Ohio State, so it's not and against with other talented offensive linemen. So it's definitely a good spot that I think with Jeff Stoutland in this O-line, if we got him, then we have our O-line of the future for the next few years. So I was definitely high on Donovan Jackson going into this.
Yeah, Donovan Jackson's awesome. He was like consistently driving guys in the run game like 5 yards. Like it was pretty wild. He's got some elite football IQ. He'd be really really good pickup for you guys, especially in that run game if you want to continue leaning on Saquon there.
Exactly. So now 3 names that I have that I didn't mention last week, but these guys are all going to be reaches. Like they would have to fall to us or we would have to trade up. But I couldn't resist putting this gentleman on the list that I want to mention first. Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Ole Miss. Now, Mason Graham from Michigan, the defensive tackle from Michigan, has been getting a lot of the hype, and also his teammate Kenneth Grant. But if we want to talk about the most disruptive defensive tackle in this draft, it would be Walter Nolan. Just he 6'4", 302 pounds, just a physical freak. And my thinking behind when I imagined him would be, when I imagine any defensive tackle that the Eagles draft, is pairing them with our already elite defensive tackle, Jalen Carter. Walter Nolan has come out and says, I'm the next Aaron Donald. And I think that mentality on this Eagles team with Jalen Carter would be, it'd be tough to stop. And listen, the Eagles have probably more pressing needs than defensive tackle. The defensive line needs to be addressed, whether it's on the edge or on the defensive tackle. We need some more bodies in there. But I think if you talk to Eagles fans, people would argue that the edge is probably the position that could use a better player. But if Walter Nolan's on the board and he ends up there, people are going to look like, oh, Howie season, like, oh man, you got the best defensive tackles in the league ready to go. And you replace Milton Williams like that with a cheap contract. So I was a huge fan of Walter Nolan. Definitely needs to just be more fundamental. He definitely because he's so disruptive, he has that ability to kind of get lost in his own explosiveness. So it's definitely one of those things that once he reels it in a bit and learns his lanes a little bit, he's going to be very effective. So I'm a huge fan of Walter Nolan.
I love that pick and yeah, he was my day 2. He's one of my day 2 picks. So I fully back everything you said. So I'm good with that.
Right, and Walter Nolan is a tough one too because he's been mocked as high as 16 to the Cardinals, which would make sense because of Jonathan Gannon. But he's also been mocked to the Eagles a couple times. So I was like, this guy would be really nice to see what happens. So these next 2 players for my tier 1 guys, they are both going to be safeties. And the reason I would want a safety in round 1 is when I think about what the Eagles really need, there's very few positions that stick out in terms of, oh man, like I would be nervous about our day one starting crew if we went into day one with the roster we have now. And I think the spot that screams to me the most is safety. We traded CJ Gardner Johnson in order to make some room. He just kind of was a financial let go that we had to do. And we have Reed Blankenship and we have Sidney Brown. And I don't know how confident the Eagles are in Sidney Brown. He was healthy last year after recovering from an ACL, and they still preferred Tristan McCollum at times when CJ did get hurt in games. So Sidney Brown was a pick that, they invested a 4th-round pick in. They might give him a chance, but I think there needs to be more competition in the room. And I don't know how big of a fan, me personally, I am if they were to go out and get a Justin Simmons or Julian Blackmon. So the first name that I wanted to mention is Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. He's the most skilled safety in this draft. He's a very do-it-all guy. I think that if you paired him with Reed Blankenship, and he also can play a little bit of slot too, so you have a little bit of versatility to switch him and Cooper around if you wanted to make some moves on that defensive backfield. And he's a very sure tackler. He's got good size, good anticipation to him. And I do think that we kind of need that do-it-all safety, that jack of all trades. Kind of reminds me of like Xavier McKinney a little bit, just always there, always in the right spot, and will always make a play. And, got to get the Georgia boys in the room. Definitely one of those things that I do think that Howie Roseman will definitely pay attention to. Malachi has been mocked because safeties are weird. Safeties are a position that drop. So Malachi definitely could fall to us, but there are teams that need safeties above us. So we may have to trade up if we wanted to get a player of that talent.
I like that pick. So if you have Malachi Starks there, I have a feeling I know who your last pick is.
Well, I did say safety, so you probably got the hint. But my final safety is going to be Nick Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina. And
he's nice.
I think when you think of a mold of a player, you kind of think of Kyle Hamilton. He's just got that size. He's 6'3". He's one of the best tackling safeties in all of college. He only missed 7 tackles last year. He's one of those guys that if you want a big physical safety, I think if you want to put him in this Fangio defense, I do think that he has the ability to make some noise and you can move him around with Reed Blankenship. And I do think with his rare blend of size and athleticism, he's a tough player to pass on. And I do think that there's going to be teams. He definitely jumped up, in the combine draft process of it all because of his traits. And I do think those traits will travel, and I think he will be a successful safety so long as everything works for him and he stays healthy. So that was definitely the end of my tier 1 guys there.
I love that. Yeah, that's exactly how I envisioned it going at the end there with the safeties. But I love the picks. I think those are solid picks, and it makes sense for the development of the team.
All right. So now these next few tiers, we're just going to kind of run through these guys because, we're going to go in depth here in a couple weeks. But definitely we wanted to throw out some more names. So Ben, who are some names that you were looking out for in your day 2, your round 2, your round 3 guys who the Niners could, if they end up trading back or maybe they trade in and trade up, this right guys on the board. Who do you got on there?
Yeah, so I mean, the first guy was Walter Nolan for me, and obviously this is going to be a reach and a half. The odds of him falling to the Niners in day 2 is pretty low, but he's been mocked kind of all over the place, and with this draft being the way that it, you think that some of these mock drafts are surprising. Just wait for draft day. I mean, there's going to be some shocking moves. So I think Walter Nolan would be a really good addition for the Niners.
Yeah.
He was he was one of the visits to the facility, so the Niners definitely have their eyes on him. They're definitely interested in him. One of the things with the Niners and just any organization when they do a top visit, it means that they're not just interested in you as a player; they're interested to see you as a man. And they want to really get to know you, get to know your character. So if an organization is inviting you to their campus to have a day with them, it means that they're fully invested in you as a player already, and they just want to get to know you a little further. So always a good sign there, and Walter Nolan was one of those picks. My next guy is Princely. I'm so bad with his last name.
No, you're okay.
Umanmian? Uman Mila. Anyway, he's a
Yeah,
dog, bro. He's a defensive end edge from Ole Miss, and I think he would be if you're not going to go edge defensive end in the first round. You know, he's got an electric burst paired with a natural blend that allows him to threaten the edge immediately. He's got length. He's a strong guy. Trains a direction and ability to pop up out of his stance. Like he's really good, and he would be a really good addition to that line. So if you're looking to build the defensive line and defensive line and find somebody maybe opposite of Nick Bosa in the second round, I think you could find Princely there.
absolutely. No, that would be. I saw Prinsley. I was like, okay, he looks good. I do think that with where the Eagles are, they're going to be able. Might hopefully that's the problem. We don't know who they're going to grab, but hopefully the Eagles grab their edge early.
Mm-hmm.
But I anticipate by the time they pick in the second round, he's going to be gone.
Yeah, exactly. So my next guy is cornerback at Iowa State, Darian Porter. I really like Darian Porter. He's a quick processor, demonstrates solid route recognition and anticipation skills. He's got a really nice frame to him. Rare length and speed combo at 6'2", with speed that shows up on tape when he's running vertically with receivers down the boundary. So he would just be another solid addition to the secondary here to work with, and to be able to play with the secondary that the Niners have kind of got, this this young Niners secondary that they've got. I think he would fit in really well, and I would be excited to see his development with that team.
Yeah, I will not be surprised. The Niners will most likely take at least one cornerback in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were them, I'm investing early because there's a lot of talent there, and I agree that you don't have to feel like, oh, if Will Johnson's there, oh, you got to take him. There are good corners in this
Yeah.
draft that you can get in round 2 or round 3. So definitely a good spot for him.
Yeah, and with the departure of Travarius Ward, that's a massive hole to fill. I think Travarius, I'd argue, was a top 5 cornerback. So those are some shoes to fill, and no better way to do it than getting a young guy in the first couple rounds. So keep your eye on Darian Porter. My next guy is Landon Jackson, defensive line edge out of Arkansas. I love
Heck
my
yeah.
edges in this draft, Marcos. This is a really fun draft when you want to look at the edge rushers, but dude, just talking about this guy and watching his tape, like excellent edge setter, brings serious juice as a stunter. High football IQ, shows up in run fits, so it would work really well in kind of dialing in that run game, and because that was a problem last season with the Niners for some reason, couldn't stop the run game. And you can say it was Dre Greenlaw, you can say it was the lack of not having Hargrave, even though Hargrave was better with the pass. Like there was there was issues with the run game. So this is a guy that could bring you an immediate presence at that rushing position, where you can really slow down the run and force teams to beat you through the air. So keep your eye on Landon Jackson, because I think if the Niners find themselves with who the best available is, could very well go with an edge in the second day.
Absolutely. Landon Jackson, one of my day 2 guys, one of my tier 2 guys for sure. He fits, one of those things with the thing with day 2 guys, tier 2 guys that that most teams have. It's like, these guys are quality players. They're still very, very good players. Maybe the upside just isn't, on paper right now, maybe the upside just isn't there. So that's why these guys slide. And Landon Jackson fits all the traits, and and in a way that he's not just, like you said, he's not just a pass rushing specialist. He is a 3-down capable player. And for edges early on, they're one of the slowest positions to develop in the league. They take a lot of time. They need to grow into their bodies, get more strength. When you have a guy who has proven production, Landon Jackson's one of those dudes, and he's so intense. And you love those players that add a level of intensity to your team that just never stop. The motor is just, it never ends. So a player like him would be a great addition to any team for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to my last pick. I wonder if you have him on your day 2. Chris Paul Jr.
Mm-mm.
Do you have him?
No.
Yes or no? Okay.
Chris Paul Jr.?
Uh-huh.
What?
Linebacker out of Ole Miss. I'm surprised. All right. Let's get into it. So, strengths. he's got nasty closing bursts to the football carrier. It shows up consistently, bringing controlled violence through his tackles. So he's one of those guys who kind of hits a lot like a guy like Malik Mustafa. Rather than, taking some stutter steps and then hitting you, he's going to go straight into you full stride. He's got an elite processing speed pre-snap, so he understands what's going on, consistently getting the defense aligned and making coverage adjustments. He's a true quarterback of the defense mentality, and having another one of those guys out there with a guy like Fred Warner is just going to boost what this defense can do, especially when you have two guys who can kind of hunt things out. And if you've got that, I've talked about it already, if you've got Fred Warner who's showing him the ropes and takes him under his wing, somebody who already understands the game a lot like, Chris Paul Jr. does, I think by getting that leadership from a guy like Fred Warner would just boost his knowledge and IQ of the game that much more. So I'm curious to see where he's going to lie. I doubt the Niners take him. That's why he was probably my fifth guy on this list. But, I wouldn't be mad whatsoever if the Niners did find a way to draft him.
No, that's an awesome pick. I don't know. I haven't been doing much research on Chris Paul Jr. So that's cool. That's cool to know that you guys, that's you're operating off positions of need. And I think that to get a linebacker with those kind of traits in the room would be helpful. And one of those guys that if you don't get your pick in round one, that definitely one that you can get later for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And he's not really necessarily the top of the linebacker list. I think he's definitely below a guy in, Carson Schwarzenegger, for instance, and Carson, he's definitely on my list in one way or the other, but I really don't see a way that the Niners end up drafting him. So, I think Chris would just be one of those, like, almost like a settle pick where it's like, well, he's the best available player, but he's absolutely a player that works well for our team.
Right, absolutely. All right, those are good two guys. So for me, we already got through one of them. That was Landon Jackson. And since you just alluded to this young man, I'm going to pick him first. Carson Schwarzenegger, the linebacker from UCLA, was definitely one of my options. Now, the weird part about it is, he could go pretty early. He could go early in the 30s or so, depending on team need. But for the Eagles, the reason I'm thinking linebacker, number one, this kid has production up the wazoo last year. Now, one really good breakout year for him since going to UCLA. He had 130 plus tackles, and he's just one of those. He is one of those green dot capable players who is very capable of reading the field, anticipating and attacking the hole, and always being successful when he does that. He very seldom messes up when he knows where he's going. I do think when I think of another linebacker for the Eagles, the only reason I would consider him is because of the injury, that the injuries that Nakobe Dean has been going through. We have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., we have Ben Van Sumeren, but we could get more guys in this room, and especially with a player of that talent, and to get him in the room with Zach Bond and letting Zach Bond do what he does best, and then letting Carson potentially do the Nakobe Dean role of it all, I think that would work perfectly. So I would love a guy like Carson in the room if we could end up, if he's a round two dude, or if we trade up for him in the round two type of thing, that would be I think he's going to be a 30s or 40s player to a linebacker needy team.
I like that a lot, and he's a team captain too. He commands the respect in a lot of ways of not just the field, but in the locker room as well. I think his work ethic fits a lot of the boxes for a team like the Eagles.
Yeah. So then my next guy that I have, this one's going to be this one's going to be dependent on some moves that need to happen in Philly for it to work. But my next guy is going to be Mason Taylor, tight end out of LSU. Now, the only reason I'm lobbing up a tight end as a potential round 2, round 3 guy is we don't know what's going to happen with Dallas Goedert. And I don't think it would be totally unfair for the Eagles to invest a higher pick if they're going on the offensive side of the ball and it's not O-line. You might as well try and find your tight end in the future. Mason Taylor, son of Hall of Fame player Jason Taylor, defensive player, and his uncle is Zach Martin as well. So he has NFL connections, and he's sure hands, great size. He's like 6'5", 260. So he's got great size and mobility. He can definitely develop as a blocker, but you're putting him in Jeff Stoutland's camp. He's going to learn a thing or two on how to use his strength and use his traits to his advantage. Um, if you want a guy who's able to attack all parts of the field, you definitely would go for Mason Taylor. So if you're looking for your tight end of the future to replace Goddard, you could even have him this year if you figure out a way to keep Goddard on the roster and just have them go for it. That would be a really cool duo to have. But I think Mason Taylor would be a good pick here.
Yeah, I looked at him a couple times. I the Niners won't take a tight end probably that early, but I think he would be a really solid pick. Someone you could find on day two that gives you kind of an immediate presence too if you need to call on him as a backup role. So I like that a lot.
Exactly. All right. So we're moving on to another edge player, and this one's going to be tough to pronounce. His name is JT Timulau from Ohio State. He's an edge rusher. Nice guy, just like a jack of all trades. They referred to him as like the pickup truck of edge rushers. Just a guy who's extremely reliable. He has great production. He played for Ohio State. They had a ton of dogs there. They did really, really well. And not to mention, just kind of like Landon Jackson, he's an impact player on all three downs. And it's a guy that you don't have to take off the field for certain situations. So you could end up with a very productive player to add to this edge rotation. Again, you can find an edge really early and in the early parts of the round too, and you would end up with a really good player. So I really like JT here in this spot for Philly.
I like that too for you guys.
All right. So my last guy in this tier list for the tier 2 is going to be cornerback Trey Amos from Ole Miss. Now, you're probably saying like, oh, well, you have Quinyon and Cooper. Well, that's true. But Darius Slay is no longer on this roster. And hey, I'm a Keely Ringo guy. I like me some Keely Ringo. He's younger than a lot of these players in this draft still. But do you want to entertain and get more competition in the room, get more depth in the room, especially since you lose Isaiah Rodgers too? So we have great corners, but our depth is kind of taking a little bit of a hit. So if you want to get another guy in the building who has proven production in a great conference, I really like Trey Amos. His skill set, he's 6'2", he has good size to him. So if you're having tall, long corners on each side of the ball, I do think he could improve a tiny bit as a tackler, but he has shown good production and has had tackles for losses. So he's not afraid to get dirty. I do think that if you get him in Fangio, get him in Vic Fangio's system, he will be able to develop as that potential second corner on the outside. So I do think it will not be out of the realm of possibility that the Eagles draft a corner early to address that CB2 need. So I would be happy if they went with a Trey Amos here.
Fire, super fire.
All right. So let's move on to our final tiers. Just dart throw names, maybe guys that, we don't know if they're dealing with injuries or maybe guys we might see in the later rounds. So throw out some names of guys who you caught your interest or the Niners might be interested in.
Yeah, so I'm going with a running back here to kick things off, and I've got three names that I just want to talk about. And they're, like you said, they're dartboard throws. This is such a toss up at this point. You don't know where any of these guys are going to go, but my first guy is Dylan Sampson, running back from Tennessee. And I've been watching Tennessee a little bit because my coworker is a big Tennessee guy, so I was keeping up throughout the season in both the basketball and the football end, and I'll tell you one thing, man. Dylan Sampson, he's got something. He's got something there. I don't think he's going to be necessarily elite, but he can be that Isaac Guerendo style player, somebody who really comes in and gives you gives you some really good reps throughout a game. And one thing that I want to kind of highlight in general is throw any running back into Kyle Shanahan's system, and they're probably going to do pretty well. So if you give him the kind of strengths that we've seen elite running backs have in Kyle Shanahan's system, you're due to have a really nice pick. And this is a guy you can find on day 3. He's got elite short area quickness with lightning quick feet to navigate traffic. So he's somebody who can burst through tiny holes like that. Exceptional burst through the hole with rare second gear acceleration that turns modest creases into chunk plays. So you're seeing that initial punch through the line, and then you're seeing him hit another gear that's just even quicker than before, and that's to get past those linebackers, potentially even to just get past the DBs. Like this guy is somebody who can beat you with speed. He's been clocked at 22, 23 miles per hour in games before. So he's a speed demon, and we have one of those in Isaac Guerendo, right? And we've seen kind of the success in him. So in a lot of ways, he's my Isaac Garenda 2.0. But you lost Jordan Mason to the Vikings,
Mhm.
and and now you've got to fill a hole because legit Jordan Mason was a player. He's a baller, and that's a hole you got to fill. I think you can fill it in this, day 3. You might be able to fill it day 2. I think that even might be reaching for the Niners considering the holes that they should be filling in the first 2 days already. So I think taking Dylan in the day 3 would be a good pick. My next guy is Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. I like Nick Martin. I doubt that the Niners will end up taking him. I like what he brings to a football team immediately. I just think that he's a shorter end of things. His weight is down. He doesn't have the best hands necessarily, but he's one of those players who does have a higher IQ. He's somebody who can really take to the like learning end of things, and playing behind a guy like Fred Warner is just going to boost him that much more. So having a kind of a backup linebacker might be somebody you find in day 3 for the Niners, and Nick Martin.
For sure.
My last guy is Mitchell Evans, tight end out of Notre Dame. I like Mitchell Evans. He flourishes in medium and deep receiving situations, so he's somebody that we could kind of just put in there and maybe use as a decoy, or if it works out, he might be there for the long shot. He consistently wins in contested catch situations due to his height and longer arms. He's strong. He demonstrates reliable feel for zone coverages. So he highlights a lot of the boxes for the Niners offensively that schematically they like to run. So I think that's a name that you can keep an eye on for the Niners. I wouldn't be surprised if they do end up taking a tight end, if they took a guy like Mitchell Evans.
I love that. That's great. Okay, so I will name out 3 of my own guys as well. So first name I really wanted to throw out, when I say tier 3, I don't know for this particular player if he's more of a day 2 guy, but his injury history might actually cause him to drop. His name is Tate Ratledge. He's a guard from Georgia. And obviously he has played with our Georgia boys too, so he's familiar, knows the Georgia history. He has had interviews with the Eagles. He isn't an official visit, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was. He kind of fits that personality of like a Landon Dickerson type of guy. And he's 6'7", 300 some pounds. So if you're just throwing him on the offensive line, then you got your ideal Philadelphia Eagles O lineman. And you could probably get him later and not have to worry. And he's one of those talented players who you could probably throw in right away, and he's probably be an upgrade over what we have here. So I definitely like Tate Ratledge. And then I want to stay on the offensive line. This man, his name is Anthony Belton. He's a tackle from NC State. Now, the only reason this name is really important, he might be more of a day 3 guy, but he was the first top 30 visit that the Eagles had. And the past 2 top 30 visits, the first players were Jordan Davis and Cooper DeJean. So it does show that the first person in the building in recent history has been drafted. So it wouldn't be surprising to see this name. And he's a mammoth. He's 6'7". He operates, he's nice and smooth on the edge. Definitely he played against, not that great competition. So he definitely needs more experience with the big boys, but he definitely has the tools and the traits to hold his own. And again, you can kind of, if he hits, you can use him as a swing tackle whenever, Lane or Jordan Mailata potentially go down if they do. So he's definitely a name to look out for because he's definitely one of the players that they visited with the Eagles. And the last name I wanted to throw in there, this guy has been projected to go in the first round, but he's coming off of a torn ACL. And I remember there was a guy who was mocked in the first round that ended up falling to the 3rd round, and his name was Nakobe Dean due to injury scares, even though he was a proven talent. So this man, his name is Siobhan Revel Jr. He's a cornerback from East Carolina, so definitely a small school guy. That's never stopped the Eagles from drafting small school corners before. He has all the tools. He's 6'2", he's wiry, he's twitchy, and he is an aggressive tackling player. He screams Quinyon Mitchell to me. Like when you watch his tape, you can just tell he's kind of he's the big fish in the little pond. He is the guy who can take over games and has the production to show for it. Now the ACL tear and the small school stuff might knock him down, but he definitely tested well in the combine and he definitely improved his draft stock amongst corners who, in this deep cornerback draft, he has all the physical traits. The question will be coming off of the ACL, how he is. And if he were to slide, he would definitely be a corner that if he somehow ended up the Eagles in round 3, that could be viewed as a steal moving forward. So those would be my tier 3 guys to look out for.
Those are awesome takes.
Yeah, so for you guys, this was our first, pre-draft vibe, kind of names to look out for. We have a ton more names, like Ben mentioned. Like it was hard to narrow down some of these favorites, and I'm sure there was guys that we're missing that, you guys out there enjoy. And if you guys have a favorite player that you want, on the Eagles or the Niners, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. We definitely want to hear your takes on that. So I think that's enough draft talk. I think that's enough talk. We're gonna do a whole mock draft special here in 2 weeks. But I loved your names because this is great. I loved hearing your process. This is good. I like this draft stuff.
So let me ask you, Marcos, what is your process like when you're evaluating these prospects? Like, do you? Yeah, I'm just trying to get kind of an insight into your process because a lot of people talk about, well, they just watch college ball and they know these names throughout the year, but I know for a fact, like you and I don't watch college ball that much. We'll pay attention to the bigger games, right? But a lot of it for me is listening to podcasts and listening to analysts and then watching film myself. If I hear a name, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to watch some videos on the highlights for his season. So what does it for you?
That is basically how I picked up my draft knowledge, right? That's definitely how I improved. I went on podcasts. I listened to people who do this every day, and they do it all year round, and they're following these guys from the beginning. And then I look at mock drafts, and I'm looking at all these different mock drafts, and where, even the big guys like Mel Kiper, I'm paying attention to those, even though he's all over the place and I disagree with it a lot. But I like knowing where, some of these guys have these guys, because I see other big boards out there that have different players in different spots. And for me, and I do the same thing with the NBA. I'm a equal part traits / production guy. I don't love it if you're all traits, no production, or if you're all production, but you came from not, you're kind of middling traits. If so, for me, it's always just been about, I think when everybody watches the game, everybody watches it in different pair of glasses, different flavor. Everybody likes different things. I like my guys to be athletic freaks who just scream potential. And basketball, it's kind of this, like, I'm a sucker for, if you give me a 3-and-D wing who can kind of do it all. Like I'm in love with those guys during the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in the NFL, it's, last year I was, and when you hear what your team needs, and you kind of have and when it's very obvious what your team needs are, it does kind of make the draft hunt a little easier in the NFL. Obviously, you and our teams have very clear and open needs that they can address. So it makes picking from a crop of players like, okay, why is this guy so hyped up? Why is this guy so hyped up? Why is this guy being talked about so negatively? Why is this guy going down for a slide? Because like you said, we don't pay attention all years. There's a lot of off the field stuff that affects these players, like Mike Green, like James Pierce. Like you got guys who are super high talents, but might be dealing with off the field stuff. But the Eagles have also historically, taken chances on players who have had some off the field issues before. So it's definitely one of those things where that evaluating this, there's so much nonsense that you have to think about. And over the years, I've just kind of figured out how the Eagles like to do this based off of the history of actually doing draft stuff myself over the past like 5+ years or so. And I really felt like I had it down to a science last year when I had, Quignon and Cooper, and I was like, I'm hitting on these guys, and they did really well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of been my process. Is just I listen just like you do. I just do research, and then I watch clips, and I don't pretend to know, like, oh man, his hand placement is absolutely perfect. Oh, like, for O linemen, like, I'm not going to pretend like I know that crap. But I listen to people who do know and who have that experience, and I definitely take that, to heart, especially for that's what we have out there. So that's kind of my process. It's just I have too much time to spend looking at draft stuff. So it's just something I've always been interested in.
Absolutely. So I'll finish this topic here before we move on to our March Madness here. But I do want to say Draft Buzz, NFL Draft Buzz was a really big help for me while I was doing a lot of research on these guys outside of watching videos and so on and so forth. NFLDraftBuzz.com is a really good place for you guys to check out if you want to just learn a little bit more about some of these prospects and read up on the strengths, the weaknesses, kind of, what happened throughout the seasons or season that they were there, whatever college. So highly recommend, check that out. No, this is not an ad or anything like that. We're not getting paid to say that. That's just me giving my respect where respect is due. So
Love it.
Marcos, let's talk some March Madness for a minute here before we wrap things up. What happened, first of all, to that Duke game?
Right. Okay. I wasn't
That was
sure.
kind of wild.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to address that or if we were going straight to the finals of it all. So yeah, no, we talked about it, right? Like I was like, oh hey, I don't think Houston's going to beat Duke, but I definitely would pick Houston. I want Houston to go to the championship game. And what a wild finish that was,
Yeah.
dude! And it's crazy how the same thing happens to Houston, not just one game later in the championship game. But we'll talk about that. But that Duke, if I'm Duke, I'm pissed after Monday, dude. I am like, dude, like I know Cooper Flag would have had a great moment. Like he would have been the star of the show. Duke would have, I think they would have dominated that Florida team if that's how Florida ended up playing until the end. So I do, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that Duke ended up fumbling and
Again.
again. And it was, and it's tough. Like, and listen, for the Houston fans out there, I'm sorry. That's just shoot the ball. Like, give yourself a chance, right? Like,
Seriously.
tough. And the way you lose to Florida, dude, like, you don't even get a shot up in the last minute and 20 seconds. The last shot that hit the rim was 2 minutes left in the game. They finished the game with 4 turnovers, and they didn't get a single shot up. And like, that's just an unbelievable way to lose a game that you ended up being in control of, and just to fall apart like that when you're right at the doorstep. Crazy. That's madness. So I was horribly surprised in that game.
It was wild, man. I mean, you texted me during the Duke game Saturday night, and we hadn't really talked all day long because I was celebrating Daniela's birthday. But Daniela and I are out at dinner, and we're at Yard House, and I'm looking at the TV and I'm watching, and I'm like, okay, Duke's controlling. It's the 1st half, Duke's controlling. All right, second half, Duke's still controlling. All right, we're good. And then there's like 5 minutes left. Duke's up like 13 points, and I'm like, okay, this feels pretty good. And then there's, I don't know, like, 2 minutes left or whatever, and it's a 7-point game. And you text me at one point and you said, well, there goes Houston.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then I see them make a shot, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, this is still a ball game. And sure enough, they found a way. You gotta give, we talk about, Duke choked, but you got to give respect to Houston to mount that comeback and stay 10 toes on that comeback the entire time. Obviously, there was a really touchy call there at the end of the game for Cooper Flag, which, if I had a say in it, that's, you don't call that. You don't make that call in any way, shape, or form, regardless of where that ball goes. But you got to hand your respect to Houston, and then you got to hand the respect to Florida for ultimately beating what everyone expected was to be the winners, in Houston. After you take down Duke like that, I think majority of the nation probably thought the Cougars were going to take that one. But shout out to the Gators, and I got to tell you, man, if there's one thing I got out of March Madness, other than that Duke continues to choke, it's that Walter Clayton Jr. is an NBA player, and he's the kind of player that, no, he's not necessarily a starter right now, but he's going to be a very solid role player in the NBA. And it's a name that I'd be curious to keep an eye on, especially if, you're Monty McNair, who likes to take his guards. I don't know about his age just yet, but if he gets older, keep an eye, Kings fans.
It's one of those things with Walton Clayton Jr. It happens every year. You get the star of the March Madness, and they're going to get the bump. Going into the year, he was a 2nd round player, potentially undrafted player at best, even with the production that he had. And
Great tournament though.
Now he's going to be a lottery pick. So it's going to
Yeah.
it's just going to be just because of the big, he's been mocked, compared to Jamal Murray a ton. And I can totally see the big shot making, in the big spots type of guy. But hey, shout out, like when you win like that and you are that good of a player, it did resemble a lot of like Kemba Walker in 2011, where he just went on this solo run and carried them to the finals. Like obviously both teams are really good. They were really good. It was more than just those guys, but if it was not for his leadership and his ability to just say, we're going to win or lose because of me, like that is a great trait to have going into the NBA for sure.
Well, and then absolutely. And then Florida's head coach, I believe, is the youngest coach since it's been a long time since a coach that young has won. And the last coach, I believe, was 37, and head coach for Florida, I don't have his name on me right now, but he's 39. So respect there, because to do that at a young age, to keep that team locked in all tournament long, that's tough to do, but they did it.
Yeah, and there's still potential for Florida. The whole NIL thing is going to make things so complicated next year. You're going to get a lot of guys in different spots. But Florida seems to have the potential to continue and potentially have a chance to run it back next year. Obviously, how are they going to replace Walter? That's going to be the big question. But, they'll probably get someone at NIL and make it worth their while. So, but yeah, no, crazy game. And on the women's side, not as fun of a game, but, Paige Beckers and UConn end up getting their title. Good for her. South Carolina, I love that Dawn Staley's an Eagles fan. I love that for her. But, at the same time, like they have been kind of running the women's basketball college landscape for the past few years. So I do think that this was UConn has always been really good. Gino Auriemma, all-time winningest coach. Like, it is impressive. And I do think, Paige kind of got lost in the whole Caitlin Clark of it all, Angel Reese of last year, and she had injuries to deal with too. But Paige, I think, was one of those uber talented players that's going to be really good in the WNBA and deserves to win a college basketball title. So that was a good win for the women's too.
Yeah, it was fun to watch, even though it wasn't a game necessarily. Exactly. But it was a good to see that outcome.
Yeah, exactly. So any final thoughts before we head out here, my brother?
No, brother, I'm good.
Yeah, a lot of stuff today. This was a fun episode, guys. With that being said, this was episode 83 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all you watching us on YouTube, please feel free to go to any of the descriptions that are up above us now. And for all you audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions to all of our socials are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow, comment. Were you surprised on March Madness? Who are you guys feeling for the draft? Do you guys think the Kings actually stand a chance in the play-in? We'll see. So please leave all your comments. We appreciate all the love and support. We're growing with you guys each and every week, and I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that. So it's cool, even if it's marginal growth. We appreciate everybody that enters this community. We love you guys so much. I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Rats.
All right, y'all. We love you. We will talk to you next week. Peace.